Let me out! Let me out! Oh, how great! We're free! We're free! After they got out, they found the treasure of pure gold and jewels, but they missed their father a lot. I wonder where my children can be. I cannot find them. Look, there's Daddy. Oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy.
How are you, my children?
We just found, look, we found some jewels.
Now we can be together forever and ever.
So the woodcutter and his family lived happily ever after.
Perhaps one reason why we like fairy tales so much is that they have a very special kind of make-believe all of their own. Fairy tales usually begin with once upon a time or long, long ago. Almost right away, a difficult obstacle is presented which must be overcome. Fairy godmothers usually are wise and help the hero. Often there is a magic wand or some other magic object for granting wishes with. Witches and wizards are usually mean. They lure children into their huts to eat them up or cast magic spells on them. Sometimes people are turned into an unusual size, put to sleep for a long time, or they are turned into such animals as frogs. But a frog can be changed back into a handsome prince if he meets the right person. Almost every fairy tale needs a beautiful princess. Here is something which may be new to you. The numbers 3 and 7 occur quite frequently. 3 sons, 3 deeds, 3 wishes, and 7 swans, 7 dwarfs. And of course, good wins over evil. It seems that fairy tales have always been a favorite kind of story, but it is only within the last few hundred years that they were collected and written down. From England, Joseph Jacobs collected stories like Jack and the Beanstalk and the story of the 3 bears. From France, Charles Perrault collected stories like Cinderella and Puss in Boots. From Germany, the Brothers Grimm collected stories like Rumpelstiltskin and Sleeping Beauty. It is interesting to know that Sleeping Beauty and some other stories were part of the folklore of more than one country. The famous Hans Christian Andersen was from Denmark. He is a modern fairy tale writer, though, because he wrote original stories rather than collecting them from the folklore of the people. By looking in the card catalog under Andersen, you can locate some of his enchanting stories. The Tinderbox is just one of many. If you look up the words fairy tales in the card catalog, you will find the names of many fairy tales. The number 398 in the left-hand corner shows that fairy tales can be found on the 398 shelves of the nonfiction section. Here you will find again that many different lands all over the world have contributed fairy tales for your enjoyment. Here is a fairy tale you may not have heard before. It is one of the best-loved fairy tales of Japan, and one of our favorites, too. The story of Isshinbashi, the Inchling. Once upon a time, there lived a childless couple who were quite old and lonely. Each day they prayed to the sun to grant them a child. Their prayers were answered. A strong and healthy child was born to them, but he was no bigger than a person's thumb. As he grew up, he was sad about being so small. So he asked his parents if he might go to the capital to seek his fortune. He found work in a beautiful mansion and spent much of his time with the princess of the mansion. She learned to love the Inchling very much. One day, when Inchling and the beautiful princess were on their way back from the temple, 3 demons appeared. They wanted to kidnap the princess. Can you imagine? Inchling fought the demons. They ran away, dropping a magic mallet. Inchling picked up the mallet and made a wish. What do you think he wished? He wished to be as tall as other men. He married the princess, and they lived happily ever after. We hope you have enjoyed our fairy tale theater. Next time you are in the library, check the fairy tale shelves. You'll find some old favorites like Hansel and Gretel, and some new ones like Isshinbashi.
Now you are invited to answer some questions about fairy tales. Before you start writing, let's look at what there is to do. In Section 1, you are asked to answer true or false to the sentences below. In Section 2, you are asked some questions about locating fairy tales. Let's read the directions. Choose the one correct answer from the 3 listed below the blank. Then say it or write it in the space provided. Section 3. By now, you may have collected some ideas for writing a fairy tale of your own. You can use some of the special fairy tale magic you've learned about. You may want to use your own original idea. Or you may begin with this one. Once upon a time, there was a peaceful kingdom of happy people. Then one day, a powerful and mean giant came along. If you are writing the answers, but not from a prepared worksheet, you may wish to make your paper look like this. Then you need to write only the answers. Write your story on the back of the paper.
Hi, folks. I'm Clarence. Mr. Clarence, my friends call me. But I'm not here today to be funny myself. I'm going to talk to you about funny books, which are usually called humor books. Many, many things are funny, but different people think different things are funny. However, there is something for everyone in a library where there are many different kinds of humor books. I want to tell you about a humor book which has been a favorite of mine for a long time. Mr. Popper's Penguins. Mr. Popper was a mild-mannered house painter. All his life he had wanted to travel. He dreamed of going to far-off places, to strange lands. But he never had the time or the money. He read adventure books, and through their pages he journeyed to distant countries all over the world. Of all the lands Mr. Popper grew to know and to love through his books, the South Pole excited him the most. "It's those penguins," he would say. "That's what I love so much about the South Pole. They're the most fascinating birds I ever heard of." One evening, he wrote a letter to Admiral Drake at the South Pole telling him how much he enjoyed the funny and delightful penguins. A few weeks later, a large wooden box arrived. Mr. Popper was speechless with delight. The box contained a real live penguin sent to him by Admiral Drake in thanks for his letter. "Gook, gook," said the penguin. And as that sounded something like cook, the Poppers named him Captain Cook. Captain Cook lost no time in practically taking over the house. Every room in it was home to him, but he liked the kitchen best. The Poppers decided that the refrigerator would make the best home for him, so they sent for a repairman to drill holes in the refrigerator door. The repairman couldn't get out of the house fast enough. It may have been Captain Cook's peck on his bare head while he was working that hurried him along. One day, while out for an airing with Mr. Popper, Captain Cook encountered Mrs. Callahan. The good lady shrieked, "Take that South Pole goose away from me!" South Pole goose, indeed. Captain Cook couldn't resist taking a parting peck at her. The next stop was the barber shop. Captain Cook's curiosity almost got the best of him. Could that white stuff on the customer's face be snow? He never got to find out. The barber ordered them to leave immediately, and by any door. One day, quite suddenly, Captain Cook began to droop. He was listless and refused his food. Greatly worried, Mr. Popper appealed to a famous aquarium for help. But the aquarium did not send a cure. They sent another droopy penguin. And that is how Greta came to live with the Poppers. That winter was truly fun for the Popper children. The Poppers left their doors and windows open so that the snow could come inside. Captain Cook and Greta took great pleasure in introducing Bill and Janie to winter sports, penguin style. When spring came, there was a new addition to the Popper family. Soon the Poppers had a very large family to be proud of, a family that ate a lot of fish and which began to cost a lot of money. Mr. Popper didn't have a lot of money, but he did have an idea. He put together a vaudeville act. With Mrs. Popper at the piano, they entered show business, calling themselves Poppers Performing Penguins. Their audiences were delighted with their act. Soon they were famous. Off stage, the penguins continued to have a delightful time wherever they went. But the people, well, they just were not used to traveling with penguins. Not in the same berth with them, anyway. It is said that into every life a little rain must fall. The rain that fell on Mr. Popper landed him in jail for a full day. Admiral Drake had returned from the South Pole, and hearing of Mr. Popper's troubles, he hastened to rescue him. The Admiral then proposed that the birds go to the North Pole to try to establish a new colony of penguins. Mr. Popper decided this would be best for his beloved penguins, but he was terribly sad. He wiped his eyes, straightened his back, and went on deck to say goodbye to Captain Cook, Greta, and Admiral Drake.
"What do you mean, goodbye?" Admiral Drake roared. "You're the keeper of the penguins, aren't you? You're coming with us. Mr. Klein here will pay you $25,000 for the rights to make a short film of your Penguins act before you leave." When it was time to say farewell, Mr. Popper and the penguins stood happily at the rail and waved goodbye to Mama, Bill, and Janie. Captain Cook and Greta waved their flippers as the great ship set sail for the North Pole. Yes, sirree. There's all kinds of humor books for all kinds of funny bones. Knowing the names of a few authors is one way to find a book just right for your funny bone. I'd like you to meet a few of the funniest writers I know. Authors of funny books, that is. This is Beverly Cleary, surrounded by a few of her best-known books. Henry and Ribsy are two of her main characters who have a series of genuinely funny adventures in everyday situations. If you've read one of Beverly Cleary's books, it's likely you'll want to read another. Introducing Robert McCluskey, author of hilarious books, including Homer Price. Homer gets into some incredible situations. Once, he couldn't stop a donut machine. If you look in the card catalog under McCluskey Robert, you'll find the titles of still more books he has written. By looking in the card catalog under poetry, you may be led to some very funny poems such as these examples. Here's a humorous verse by Edward Lear. "There was an old man with a beard who said, 'It is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all made their nests in my beard.'" Here's a poem entitled "The Panther" by Ogden Nash. "The panther is like a leopard, except it hasn't been peppered. Should you behold a panther crouch, prepare to say ouch. Better yet, if called by a panther, don't answer." Yes, sirree, folks, like I said, all kinds of humor for all kinds of funny bones. Now, I'd like to show you a few of the ways my funny friends, the humor writers, make their readers laugh. They may take a simple idea and exaggerate it to the extreme. In The Duchess Bakes a Cake, the Duchess puts too much yeast in a cake she is baking. It rises, with her on top, till she's almost out of sight. The Duchess Bakes a Cake is an example of delightful nonsense. Ribsy is the title character of an animal book in which the writer amuses us with realistic humor. The things that happen to Ribsy could really happen, but in realistic humor, the writer also uses exaggeration. In the story, Ribsy dislikes his bath so much he runs away from home. Surprise is another important way which humor writers use to delight us. Here, Mrs. Fawley, who adopted Ribsy, surprises the ladies of the tea party. The author of The Enormous Egg shows us that having two totally different and unrelated things together in one situation can be used to create humor. Nate Twitchell doesn't quite realize what he's getting into when he starts to raise what turns out to be the only living dinosaur in the world. The idea of having a prehistoric creature living in a modern city leads to an enormous amount of fun. How else can a writer create funny ideas for us to laugh at? How about having his characters act very dumb in everyday situations? This is what happens in The Peterkin Papers. The Peterkin Papers is a series of episodes about the fantastic and unbelievable Peterkin family. Mr. and Mrs. Peterkin, their children, and a certain lady from Philadelphia who has a little more sense than the Peterkins. One summer, a piano is moved into the house. The movers leave the keyboard against the window, a satisfactory arrangement as long as the weather is nice. When winter comes, it is the lady from Philadelphia who must suggest that they